Have you ever heard words so small yet so heavy they shatter something deep inside you? On a rainy night in a quiet town, a little girl sat alone in a diner, clutching her worn teddy bear. When the waitress asked if she wanted dinner, she whispered, "I don't deserve to eat." Across the room, a man who had lost everything froze. He knew that kind of pain, the kind that convinces you love and comfort are for everyone else but you. What happened next was not just chance, but the beginning of a story about second chances, about a bond strong enough to change two broken lives forever. This is more than a story. It's a reminder that hope often arrives when we least expect it. Stay with us and subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, because sometimes the quietest voices echo the loudest truths. The rain tapped steadily against the windows of the small-town diner, a soft percussion that filled the silence with its patient rhythm. The streets outside were nearly empty, slick with water, and reflecting the neon glow of the diner's sign, which flickered as though it too was tired of holding on. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and buttered toast, the kind of scent that should have been comforting, but to Noah Sinclair, it only deepened the hollow quiet that had followed him for years. He had driven aimlessly that evening, his black SUV carrying him through the winding backroads of northern Idaho, until the glow of May's diner became a small beacon against the October storm. He lingered in the car for a long while, watching the rain blur the pine trees into a watercolor haze. The dashboard clock ticked in stubborn defiance of time, each second a reminder of how little purpose he had left. Since Emily's death, the silence had been relentless, filling every corner of his life no matter how he tried to outrun it. The sound of rain was the closest thing he had to comfort now. It lulled him, wrapped him in its constancy, and reminded him of all the nights he had once fallen asleep listening to her voice, only to wake to an emptiness that no amount of work or wealth could fill. Eventually, he turned off the ignition and stepped into the storm. The weight of his coat felt heavier than it should, as though grief had stitched itself into the very fabric. The cold air smelled of wet earth and smoke from a wood-burning stove somewhere nearby. He paused at the entrance of the diner, his reflection ghostly in the glass, before pushing open the door. The bell above jingled, a cheerful sound that did not match the weight in his chest. Inside, the world felt suspended in another era. Chrome-rimmed tables with red vinyl booths, faded posters on the wall, and a counter stacked with steaming cups. A handful of locals lingered, their laughter low and familiar, the kind of sound that belonged to people who had not been hollowed out by loss. For a moment, Noah thought he could simply disappear into the background, just another man passing through. But then his gaze caught on something he could not look away from. In the far corner at table 7, a little girl sat alone. She could not have been more than 6 years old. Her blonde hair was tangled, her cheeks streaked with the dried remnants of tears. A small, faded pink suitcase rested by her feet, and in her arms she clutched a teddy bear so worn it was missing one eye. She sat very straight, hands folded in her lap, as if she had been instructed to take up as little space as possible. Her eyes were fixed on the table, wide and unblinking, as though she were waiting for the surface to swallow her whole. The waitress, May, moved toward her with a gentle smile. "Hey there, sweetheart, you want something to eat?" Her voice carried the kind of kindness that small towns are built on. The girl's reply was barely audible, but it seemed to hang in the air, heavier than the storm outside. "I do not deserve dinner." Noah froze. The words struck him with the force of a memory he had buried deep, the kind of ache that did not fade but lingered just beneath the skin, waiting for the right moment to resurface. His throat tightened, his chest constricted. It was not pity he felt. It was recognition. Those words belonged to someone who had already been told too many times that they were unworthy of love, of care, of even the simplest kindness. In that instant, Noah was no longer standing in May's diner. He was standing in his past, staring into the echo of his own grief. Without thinking, he stepped forward. "I will pay for her meal," he said softly to May. She gave a small nod and disappeared into the kitchen. Noah slid carefully into the booth across from the girl, leaving space between them so she would not feel trapped. Her tiny frame seemed swallowed by the oversized booth. She kept her gaze on the bear's frayed paw, refusing to look at him. "It is all right," Noah said gently, his voice softer than it had been in years. "You can eat. That part is not up for debate." The girl's fingers tightened around the bear. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but stripped of hope, like a line she had rehearsed too many times. "If you are not going to take me, then this chair is mine." The words were so matter-of-fact, so detached, that they cut deeper than any plea could have. Noah recognized that tone. It was the armor of someone who had been taught not to expect kindness, not to believe in rescue. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, clutching the bear tighter, she whispered, "Piper." "I am Noah," he replied simply, offering no titles, no explanations. Just a name, a peace offering. Piper's eyes flickered up for the briefest second, revealing a bruised blue so fragile it made his chest ache. She looked away quickly, as though afraid she had given too much. At that moment, May returned with a plate of grilled cheese and a bowl of tomato soup. She set it down with quiet care, adding crackers and a glass of water. Piper stared at the food, unmoving. Noah nudged the plate a little closer. "It is yours. You can have as much as you want." His words carried no urgency, only quiet assurance. Finally, with slow, deliberate movements, Piper picked up the spoon. Each gesture was cautious, as if she expected the food to vanish or perhaps be taken away. She ate carefully, savoring each bite, her small frame trembling with a hunger that seemed as much emotional as physical. Noah watched in silence, resisting the urge to fill the space with questions or reassurances. He wanted to ask where her parents were, why she was here alone, why she carried a suitcase instead of laughter. But he knew better than to demand answers from someone already carrying too much. When she finished, she folded her hands neatly in her lap, as if preparing herself for the next disappointment. Noah leaned back, the ache in his chest pressing harder. "It is late," he said softly. "Is there someone you want me to call?" Piper shook her head. "There is no one to call," she whispered. "She left me here. She said if anyone asked, I should say I do not deserve dinner because I ruin things." The words nearly broke him. Noah clenched his fists beneath the table, forcing his voice to remain steady. "You did not ruin anything, Piper." The statement felt strange on his tongue, almost foreign, but true in a way that made his throat burn. He thought of Emily, her laughter, her relentless belief in goodness, her ability to find light even as illness dimmed her days. He missed that hope. He missed being able to give it. Yet, as he looked at the little girl across from him, shivering in her oversized coat, he felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever. A reason to stay. A reason to fight. "If you could go anywhere tonight," he asked gently, "where would you want to go?" Piper hugged the bear tightly to her chest and whispered, "Anywhere that is not back." Noah nodded, the weight of her words settling deep in his bones. He stood, offering his hand but not reaching for hers. "All right," he said. "We will figure it out, together." The rain had slowed to a mist by the time Noah guided Piper toward his SUV. She carried her small suitcase with both hands, her posture rigid but dignified, as though she were determined not to show how tired she was. He opened the passenger door carefully, not wanting to startle her, and she climbed in without a word. The bear remained clutched tightly in her arms, its threadbare fabric worn thin by years of holding on too hard. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and pine, the familiar scent of his solitude. He adjusted the heater, filling the cabin with warmth, and for a long moment they sat in silence. Piper pressed her face against the cold glass of the window, watching droplets chase each other down in crooked paths. Her small breaths fogged the glass, leaving faint, fleeting imprints that disappeared almost as soon as they formed. She seemed to shrink into herself, as if trying to make her body invisible. Noah glanced at her, his chest tight with a mix of anger and sorrow he could not yet name. He wanted to tell her she was safe, but the words felt too fragile to hold the weight of her fear. The drive north was quiet, broken only by the sound of the tires against wet pavement and the occasional sigh from the old engine. At first, Noah tried small talk. "Do you like cartoons?" Was met with a shrug. "What is your favorite color?" Brought no response at all. Eventually, he let the silence stand between them, not as a wall but as a bridge still under construction. For once, he did not fear the quiet. Instead, he accepted it, realizing that silence could sometimes be a kind of comfort when words felt like too much. When they reached the cabin by the lake, the porch light flickered weakly against the darkness. Noah paused at the door, letting Piper step inside first. The air was heavy with cedar and faint traces of Emily's lavender hand cream that seemed to linger no matter how many years passed. The cabin had always been a place of retreat, of unfinished conversations with grief. Now, with a child standing in the entryway, it felt different, less like a monument to loss and more like a fragile chance at beginning again. Piper stood still, her eyes darting across the room as though cataloging every possible escape route. Her suitcase remained close at her side, a lifeline she would not surrender. Noah set about making her something to eat, though he quickly realized he had no idea what children wanted. He reached for bread and cheese, fumbling with the pan. The first attempt ended in disaster. Burnt toast, melted cheese that clung stubbornly to the skillet, a sharp smell of failure filling the room. A bowl slipped from his damp hands and shattered against the tile, the sound making Piper flinch violently. Noah muttered under his breath, frustration bubbling in his chest, but he forced himself to start again. Slowly, carefully, he produced something edible, grilled cheese sandwiches with tomato soup, not too hot, and a glass of water. He placed them on the coffee table where Piper sat, curled on the edge of the couch, her bear clutched to her chest like armor. "It is safe," he said softly. "There is plenty." She eyed the food suspiciously, her movements cautious and deliberate, but finally she began to eat. Each bite was slow, as though she were testing the food for disappointment. Noah did not hover, but he made sure the towel was close by the fire for her to warm her hands. He left the bathroom door ajar so she would not feel trapped. Every small gesture was a wordless promise. "Tonight, you are not invisible." When she finished, she placed the spoon neatly beside the bowl, a ritual of control in a world where she had none. Noah offered her one of his old t-shirts, soft and oversized, telling her it could serve as pajamas. She accepted it with both hands like a fragile gift before disappearing into the bathroom. Alone in the hallway, Noah sat on the bench, burying his face in his hands. He could negotiate contracts worth millions, keep a corporation running with a single call, but he felt helpless here, faced with the simple need for comfort. Yet when her voice drifted softly from behind the bathroom door, "Are you still out there?" he felt something shift. His throat tightened, but his answer was steady. "Yes, I am here." When she emerged, her hair damp and cheeks flushed, she no longer avoided his eyes. He smiled gently. "Better." She gave the faintest nod before following him to the small guest room. The bed was neatly made, a faded quilt smoothed flat. He placed the bear on the pillow and pulled back the covers. Piper slid in, clutching the toy close, her eyes never leaving his as he stepped back into the hallway. He sat on the bench outside her room, listening for the rhythm of her breathing. When it finally came, soft and even, he felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. He opened his old journal, untouched since Emily's death, and scribbled a line. "She is not mine, but I will not let her be alone tonight." The morning came gray and heavy, the lake shrouded in mist. Noah brewed coffee while Piper clutched her bear, eyes wide with panic at the sight of his duffel bag near the door. "Please do not make me go back," she whispered, her voice trembling. Noah dropped to his knees, meeting her gaze with steady resolve. "You are not going back to anyone who hurt you," he promised. The weight of her small hand clutching his sleeve was almost unbearable in its fragility. For the first time since they met, she leaned into him, just enough for trust to flicker like the first light of dawn. Later that day, he drove her to the community clinic. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and lemon, a world away from his sleek office in Chicago. Dr. Savannah Lee knelt at Piper's level, speaking with patience that came from years of listening to broken stories. Piper answered in monosyllables, hiding behind her bear, but her silence spoke volumes. The diagnosis was not surprising: chronic neglect. Nothing life-threatening, but wounds deeper than any physical mark. Noah felt anger coil inside him, sharp and unfamiliar. Grief had hollowed him out, but this was different. This was fury at a world that could tell a child she did not deserve to be cared for. From the clinic, he took her to the sheriff's office, a squat building with mismatched furniture and a vending machine rattling in the corner. Piper sat beside him, small and watchful, while he explained the situation. Lieutenant Kim, a patient man with kind eyes, asked Piper gentle questions. When she finally whispered her last name, Dalton, the air in the room seemed to shift. Her father was alive. Somewhere, someone had let her believe she was unwanted. The lie was too deliberate, too cruel. Noah clenched his hands, steadying his breath. He promised himself, quietly but fiercely, that he would not let her face it alone. Not anymore. The trip to Spokane carried with it a strange weight, a feeling that every mile pressed them closer to a truth too heavy for either Noah or Piper to escape. The SUV hummed steadily along the wet highway, pine trees flashing past in blurred lines of green and gray. Piper sat in the back seat this time, her suitcase at her feet, the bear secured tightly in her arms as though she feared it would vanish if she loosened her grip. She barely spoke, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape, every so often lifting her head to check the road signs as if memorizing each one. Noah kept one hand steady on the wheel, his jaw tight, fighting to stay calm. He had negotiated mergers, steered companies through chaos, yet nothing had ever felt as fragile as the silence of this small girl watching the world speed by. At the precinct in Spokane, reporters swarmed outside like vultures sensing a story. Noah shielded Piper as best he could, guiding her through a side entrance arranged by Cara Bishop from Child Protective Services. Inside, the building smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant, and the fluorescent lights seemed almost cruel in their brightness. Piper clung to his coat sleeve, shrinking back from every echo of footsteps in the hall. He lowered himself to her level, speaking softly. "You are safe here. No one is going to take you anywhere without me." She nodded faintly, but the fear in her eyes lingered. The waiting seemed endless. Then suddenly the door burst open and a man staggered inside, his tie loosened, his face pale with exhaustion. Mark Dalton. He dropped to his knees without hesitation, reaching out not with certainty but with desperation. "Piper, baby girl." His voice cracked as though the words had been trapped for weeks. Piper froze, clutching the bear tighter. Her small voice trembled. "You did not want me." It was not an accusation, but a wound laid bare, a fragile test of whether love could still exist for her. Mark's face crumbled. "Never, sweetheart, not for a single second. You are my world. I was looking everywhere." He pulled a photograph from his pocket, a younger Piper smiling, and held it in shaking hands. The sight broke something open in Noah, not envy but the sharp ache of watching a wound begin to close. Piper hesitated, torn between fear and hope, before finally stepping forward. Mark gathered her into his arms, his shoulders shaking with sobs as he repeated her name like a prayer. For the first time, Piper did not resist. She let herself be held. Noah turned away, swallowing the burn in his own eyes. It felt like watching a storm give way to sunlight, fragile but undeniable. But the moment of peace did not last. The door opened again and Mara Quinn entered, composed and calculating, her lawyer at her side. She spoke with icy detachment, dismissing Piper's story as the inventions of a difficult child. Piper recoiled, pressing against Noah's side, trembling as Mara's gaze cut through the room. Noah placed an arm gently around her shoulders, steadying her with his presence. Mark's anger rose like a storm. "You left her. You lied." The evidence, carefully gathered by Aiden Cross, painted a picture that Mara could not explain away. Phone records, receipts, traffic cameras, all of it pointing to deliberate abandonment. Kara's voice was steady, relentless. "This is no misunderstanding. This is neglect, and you will answer for it." Mara's expression never cracked, but her silence betrayed her. The legal proceedings unfolded quickly, but for Noah the focus remained on Piper. Her small hand clung to his, her knuckles white, her eyes darting between faces as though measuring who would stay and who would disappear. Each time she looked at him, Noah nodded. A silent promise. He was not leaving. When the order was given granting Mark emergency custody, Piper's shoulders sagged in relief. She whispered a soft thank you, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. In the days that followed, the world seemed to shift. Piper began to settle into her father's care, slowly testing the fragile ground of trust beneath her feet. Noah remained close, not as a replacement but as a bridge, someone who had been there in the darkest hours. At night, he read aloud over video calls, his voice steady as Piper colored in her sketchbook. She showed him drawings of 3 figures holding hands, sometimes labeled "Me Daddy Noah," with the bear floating like a guardian above them. Each drawing was a small miracle, proof that hope could grow even in soil once poisoned by lies. The legal battle against Mara unfolded in the background, a storm that Noah and Mark weathered together with Kara and Aiden's help. Some nights after Piper was asleep, Mark would sit with Noah under the stars, admitting his fears. "I do not know if I can undo what she has been told." Noah would nod, his voice low. "You cannot erase it, but you can stay. That is what matters." Those words, Noah realized, were as much for himself as for Mark. Staying was the hardest part, and yet it was the only way forward. Piper's birthday became a turning point. The backyard filled with laughter, balloons, and the scent of chocolate cake. For the first time, Piper ran freely, her hair sparkling in the sun, her laughter bright. She spotted Noah and pulled him into the chaos, crowning him with a lopsided paper tiara. "You are one of us now," she declared, her smile unguarded. Noah laughed, but deep inside something shifted. Belonging had always felt out of reach, but here it was, offered by a child who had once believed she deserved nothing. As dusk settled, Piper sat on the swing, her small voice breaking the quiet. When she said, "I did not deserve dinner," I thought maybe she was right. The words pierced Noah's heart, but he steadied himself. He leaned closer, his tone firm but gentle. "You deserve dinner. You deserve stories at bedtime. You deserve people who stay, and you always will." Piper's eyes glistened, and she leaned against his shoulder, her swing rocking in time with his. Mark knelt in front of her, his voice thick with emotion. "No more lies. You are safe now. You are home." The 3 of them sat there together, bound by silence, trust, and the fragile hope of healing. Later, as the party ended, Piper handed Noah a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing of 3 figures hand in hand, with the words "home" everywhere scrawled in purple crayon. Noah swallowed hard, pressing the drawing to his chest. That night, back at his cabin, he placed it on the table and opened his journal. His hand trembled only slightly as he wrote, "She came to me lost and left me found." The empty chair by his kitchen table no longer symbolized absence but possibility, waiting for laughter yet to come. And as the lake shimmered silver outside the window, Noah knew the truth. Piper had always deserved dinner, and so had he. Some stories do not simply end. They linger, echoing in the quiet spaces of our lives long after the final page has turned. Piper's journey was never just about a child abandoned in a diner or a grieving man who stumbled into her life by chance. It was about the fragile miracle that happens when broken people find each other and dare to believe that healing is possible. It was about the moment a frightened little girl whispered, "I do not deserve dinner," and the way one man's refusal to let her believe that lie changed everything. For Noah, the cabin by the lake had once been a sanctuary of silence, a place where loss echoed louder than laughter. Yet in the presence of a child who carried her own invisible scars, he discovered something he had thought was gone forever: purpose. Each meal he made, each night he stayed awake to listen for her breathing, each promise he kept was not just for Piper, it was also for himself. In caring for her, he found a reason to keep showing up. In staying, he discovered that the act of choosing someone, day after day, can be the most powerful form of love. For Piper, the lies that had been carved into her heart began to unravel. Every time Noah showed up, every time her father held her and told her she was wanted, another thread of that cruel story loosened. Trust did not come easily. It never does, especially for a child who has been taught to believe that love is conditional. But slowly, through presence and patience, she learned a truth more powerful than abandonment. She was worthy. worthy of dinner, of bedtime stories, of laughter, of belonging. And for Mark, the father who had searched desperately, the reunion was both painful and redemptive. The road ahead would not be simple. Healing rarely is. But in holding his daughter close, in standing shoulder to shoulder with Noah, he found the courage to face the long work of rebuilding trust. Together, they formed a circle of care strong enough to carry Piper through the storms that still lay ahead. This story is not just about Piper or Noah or Mark. It is about all of us. It is a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can alter the course of a life. It is a call to stay, to listen, to show up even when it feels like the weight of the world is too much. Because sometimes, what saves us is not grand gestures but the quiet, stubborn choice to believe that no one is beyond love. If this story touched your heart, let it stay with you. And if you believe in the power of compassion, resilience, and second chances, join us here at Hidden Echo Stories. Subscribe and let us keep sharing these echoes of hope together. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting to hear that they too deserve dinner.